Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's contract tip has to do with the appraisal gap stipulation and a buyer getting an FHA insured loan or a VA insured loan. How does all of that work in the contract? Let me talk about this first and stay tuned to the end, and I will let you in on a secret. Hopefully it's not a secret. Hopefully it won't be a secret after this video. So, a buyer getting an FHA loan or a VA loan, as we call it in the vernacular, really means that that loan is insured by the FHA, the Federal Housing Authority, or the VA, the Veterans Administration, both government organizations. Now, these government organizations, in order to insure the loan to a lender who's going to actually lend the borrower the money, there are certain hoops that the lenders have to jump through, so to speak, or certain criteria that they must meet federally. So it's federal regulation because the FHA and VA are federal agencies. So one of those issues from the lender perspective is what's called an amendatory clause. And basically what that does is that protects the buyer getting an FHA insured loan or a VA insured loan protection that should the property appraise for less than sale price, then the buyer is not obligated to go through with that purchase. In other words, they can terminate that contract and they will get their earnest money back. They can terminate the contract under no penalty, meaning not lose their earnest money. And that is a federal regulation for an FHA or a VA insured loan. So how does all of this tie in with our fast market or any fast market? We run in cycles, but right now we're in an extremely fast market. And a lot of buyers, in order to entice a seller to pick their offer over a competing buyer's offer, has what we lovingly refer to as an appraisal gap contingency or stipulation, not contingency, appraisal gap stipulation. In essence, and please don't use this as verbiage, we have offered verbiage to any agent who is with Maximum One Realty or has taken our classes through the Georgia Real Estate Academy. But please check with your own broker or with a closing attorney, or feel free to contact me. But because you have to tie it into the contract and give termination rights and earnest money. But anyway, the essence of an appraisal gap stipulation states that the buyer is willing to pay. An appraisal gap stipulation will go in the initial buyer's offer. Basically, it says the buyer is willing to pay X amount of dollars. Okay, you go under contract at a certain price. Then it states that if the appraisal comes in lower than the contract sale price, the buyer is willing to bring cash to the closing table for X amount of dollars over the low appraisal up to the contract sale price. You know what I'm talking about. Appraisal gap stipulation, again, as a stipulation to entice a seller to take one buyer's offer over another one, so that the seller has more confidence that the deal will still go through should the appraisal come in lower than the contracted sale price. Now, what does all this have to do with a buyer getting an FHA or a VA loan and this amendatory clause that is required to be signed by the FHA and by the VA? Well, let's look at the amendatory clause first. We'll look at the contracts and then we'll go from there. So the amendatory clause, and this is verbiage from the FHA and the VA. It's a little bit different. You can find it on HUD's website, FHA's website. It is also in our contracts here in Georgia. It is included in the FHA and VA loan contingency exhibits in the GAR, as well as the FHA and VA loan contingency exhibits in the RE forms. Regardless if it is not in a contract, a lender is going to require that a borrower sign that prior to getting the loan. And it is, okay, so let me read you what it is. So it states in the GAR contracts on the FHA loan exhibit and the VA loan exhibit, it is paragraph 11. And in essence, this is the appraisal contingency paragraph. And it states, it is expressly agreed that notwithstanding any other provision to this agreement, buyer shall not be obligated to complete the purchase of a property described herein or incur any penalty of forfeiture of earnest money deposits or otherwise, unless the buyer has been given in accordance with HUD FHA requirements by a written statement of the Federal Housing Commissioner or direct endorsement lender setting forth the appraised value of the property of not less than X amount of dollars, and that would be the sale price. And it goes on that basically says the buyer has the privilege of continuing, but not the obligation to proceeding if the appraisal comes in low. Same thing for the VA loan. Let me read it. It is expressly agreed that notwithstanding any other provision of this agreement, the buyer shall not incur any penalty by forfeiture of earnest money deposits or otherwise be obligated to complete the purchase of the property described herein in this agreement if the purchase price or cost exceed the reasonable value of the property as established by the Veterans Administration. And again, it goes on with a little bit more information. There are no time frames on an appraisal or on the amendatory clause paragraph for an FHA or VA buyer. What does that mean? That means their rights, an FHA or VA buyer's rights to terminate a contract and get their earnest money back should the property appraised for less than sale price extend through day of closing or any extension of the day of closing. So that's the first thing. So that's the second thing. First thing is, if it appraises less than sale price, they're entitled to terminate and get their earnest money back. Second thing is, the time frame on that goes through day of closing because there is no time limit on the amendatory clause paragraph. Now, you're thinking, Dana, I always learned that special stipulation, any stipulation will supersede the anything in an exhibit, and anything in an exhibit will supersede anything in an actual contract. How does that all play out? So, generally speaking, you are correct in the hierarchy of what takes precedence or what the agreements are in a contract, purchase and sale agreement for real property. However, there is an exception for an FHA or VA buyer based on this. This amendatory clause is an exception. It is federally prohibited to require a buyer to go through with the contract, and it is federally prohibited to prevent an FHA or VA buyer from terminating a contract and losing their earnest money. So a buyer and a seller cannot contract for something that is against a federal regulation. I don't care if they agree or not. It's not allowed by the FHA or by the VA. So, regardless of that, conceptually, it is spelled out in the contracts. So, in the GAR contract, now, this is in the 2022 GAR contract, but prior to 2022, the concept still stands that a federal regulation is going to supersede anything that the buyer and seller agree to. But in the 2022 GAR contract, they have specifically written it out. It's in Form F-201, the Purchase and Sale Agreement. It is a brand new paragraph, paragraph L, Rules for Interpreting this Agreement, which basically states that if they're in the event of, I'll just read it to you. In the event of internal conflicts or inconsistencies in this agreement, the following rules for how those inconsistencies shall be resolved will apply. 1. Handwritten changes shall control over pre-printed or typed provisions. 2. Exhibits shall control over the main body of the agreement. 3. Special stipulations shall control over both exhibits and the main body of the agreement. Number four, notwithstanding the above, any amendatory clause in an FHA or VA exhibit shall control over inconsistent or conflicting provisions contained in a special stipulation, other exhibit, or the main body of this agreement. And in the RE forms contract, it has verbiage on the FHA and VA loan exhibits that exhibit shall control, which means it supersedes over the otherwise hierarchy of what shall apply, or the rules for what the parties have agreed to. So, what does all of this mean? All of this means, I'll tell you what all this means in a second. Here we go. So what does all of this mean? All of this means that you need to pay attention as a listing agent and understand your contracts. What it means is if a buyer is an FHA or a VA insured buyer, and in their offer they include an appraisal gap stipulation that states that the buyer will bring X amount of dollars should the property appraise for less than sale price. The buyer will bring X amount of dollars to the closing table, not to exceed the contract sale price. That is not enforceable. It is trickeration. It's not trickeration. It's just an enticement, and there's a lot of agents that either don't understand it or buyers that insist that be in there because they're seeing all kinds of things online. But bottom line is an appraisal gap stipulation is not enforceable on an FHA or a VA contract where a buyer's getting an FHA or a VA insured loan. So if you are a listing agent and the loan type is one of the government insured loans and there's an appraisal gap stipulation, it doesn't matter. It may as well not be there because regardless of that special stipulation, a buyer has, should the property appraise for less than sale price, a buyer has through day of closing to terminate that contract, send notice of termination, and they will get their earnest money back. This has always been the case. This is not just new with the 2022 Georgia Association of Realtors verbiage in their purchase and sale agreement. This has always been the case. It's just spelled out now for clarification purposes. Now, in any loan, whether a buyer's getting an FHA loan, a VA loan, a conventional loan, a buyer is always has the opportunity to bring additional cash to the closing table to get the loan done. They don't have to have a special stipulation to bring more money to meet the contract sale price. The seller has agreed to sell it at whatever that sale price is. There's no obligation unless the parties have agreed to it in writing for a seller to come off of that sale price in response to a low appraisal. Again, done a video on that with some verbiage for that, but if you don't have that verbiage in that, the buyer and seller have basically agreed to that contract sale price for the seller. If it is a buyer getting a conventional loan and the appraisal comes in for less than sale price and there is an appraisal gap special stipulation in there, then yes, that does, a special stipulation will control or take preference or supersede the verbiage in the conventional loan exhibit. However, not for FHA and VA. So welcome your comments below. Again, this has always been the case. Let me just give you one quick example. Well, I'm not going to give you that example. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.